I will now go back to the Special Committee of Council meeting and resume that meeting. For the purposes of people at home, I'll go through the general open. So people on the audio recording, good evening. I'm Councillor Andrew Davenport, Mayor of Whitehorse, and I welcome you all to tonight's special committee meeting. I formally open this special committee meeting and ask for you all to stand for the opening prayer and statement. We give thanks, O God, for the men and women of the past whose generous devotion to the common good has been the making of our city. Grant that our own generation may build worthily on the foundations they have laid. Direct our minds that all we plan and determine is for the well-being of our city. Amen. In the spirit of reconciliation, Whitehorse City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Please be seated. Item number 2, Councillor Carr and Councillor Ellis have previously sought and been granted a leave of absence for tonight's special committee meeting of 10th of September 2018. I would now like to introduce our councillors and senior officers here this evening. Councillor Bill Bennett.
Good evening and welcome.
Councillor Blair Barker.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Councillor Tina Liu.
Good evening. Welcome.
Councillor Prue Cutts.
Good evening, everyone.
Councillor Ben Stennett. Good evening. Councillor Denise Massoud.
Good evening, everybody.
Councillor Andrew Munro.
Good evening. Great to see the explosion in numbers since we first started tonight.
Staff on my left, Chief Executive Officer, Miss Nolene Duff.
Good evening.
General Manager Infrastructure, Mr. Nigel Brown.
Good evening.
General Manager Corporate Services, Mr. Peter Smith.
Good evening.
Executive Manager Governance and Customer Service, Mr. Tony DeFazio.
Good evening.
Team Leader Governance, Miss Jenny Russell.
Good evening.
General Manager City Development, Mr. Jeff Green.
Good evening.
General Manager Human Services, Miss Terry Wilkinson.
Good evening.
In the Public Gallery, Manager Communications, Miss Sally Freud. And also Siobhan Belmore, Head of Major Projects and Buildings. So with item number 2, apologies. I've mentioned earlier, Councillor Carr and Councillor Ellis have already granted have had their leave of absence granted. I'll move on to disclosure of conflicts of interest. Councillors and officers, are there any disclosures of conflicts of interest in regards to matters to be considered on tonight's agenda? If so, I will require councillor and officers to disclose that interest and nature of that interest. There being none, I'll move to item number 4, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, we have listed on the agenda the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 13th of August 2018, requiring confirmation by the committee. Can I have a motion to confirm the minutes, please?
So moved.
Councillor Munro moved, seconded. Councillor Bennett. Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item number 5, general submissions. I'll go through it. The special committee provides the opportunity for anyone who is registered with the council administration to make a presentation before the special committee. Speakers will be given a maximum time of 3 minutes for their presentation, and reminder at 30 seconds, and there's no opportunity for interjection or debate on the issue, and we have no speakers registered this evening. So we'll move on to item number 6, reports from officers. There are none. I'll go on to item number 7, other business. Councillors, in accordance with our council procedure in regards to raising matters of other business, are there any proposed written motions for consideration this evening?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Barker. So I'll ask for that motion to be put on the screen. I'll just ask Councillor Barker to please read your motion.
Thank you, Mayor. That Council direct Council officers to apply to the Federal Department of Industry, Innovation and Science for a Safer Communities Fund, Round 3, Infrastructure Grant, for video surveillance measures and other security measures, including a mobile CCTV. And 2, in the interim, immediately deploy improved security measures at Springfield Park, which could include video surveillance.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Seconded, Mayor.
Councillor Liu seconded. Councillor Barker, your opening speech.
Thanks very much indeed, Mayor. Councillors, this motion is about 2 items. The first is directing our officers to apply to the federal government for a grant for mobile CCTV. We know, and our officers know, that it helps to deter crime and other antisocial behaviour. We've had that briefing from Victoria Police. And that mobile CCTV is again showing the smarts that this council's got in terms of leveraging the latest in technology, in terms of solar powered, in terms of lower cost, greater sustainability. And finally, the second part of this motion is about Springfield Park, a very important community asset in the Elgar ward with Councillor Leo and I. Council's invested $8 million in a pavilion there. The facilities are used by upwards of 1,000 people a week, and very sadly it's been the subject, the 400 metres surrounding that very valued pavilion and an electricity substation have been subjected to 7 arson attacks in recent weeks, including 3 on Saturday, Mr Mayor. I established that nearly $10,000 damage has already been done to both our assets and private assets in terms of a ram raid that was there, other rubbish dumping, and now these arson attacks. This has my community, our community, deeply concerned. We know that we can fix these issues. We need to protect the assets that our ratepayers have paid for, and we'll work in partnership with Victoria Police. This is going to be great for the Elgar ward, but most importantly, it will be great for the entire city, because hopefully this is only a temporary challenge to law and order, so that we can then redeploy whatever assets we might be able to secure in other troublesome parts of the city. So please, councillors, we know we've got a challenge with some of this behaviour in some parts of the city. I'd ask you to stand up, be counted, and let's get this done. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, this is looking at community safety as well as asset protection. I think as a council and as a community, our community should be able to feel safe. And unfortunately, due to a number of recent attacks and criminal activity, particularly at Springfield Park, I do agree that there needs to be, we do need to amp up the security measures. Now, applying for this fund not only addresses some of the issues, for example, at Springfield Park, but it's also an opportunity for us to look at other problem areas in the municipality. I think it's also important for us to work closely with VicPol, particularly around the intel that they have to assess and address some of the security issues, engage on their expertise as well regarding improving security in the area. So I do support this motion, and I urge my fellow councillors to support this motion also. Thank you.
Is there a speaker against the motion? Is there a speaker in favour of the motion? There being no speakers, I'm going to put the motion straight to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. I'd now like to ask councillors again, are there any proposed further written motions for consideration this evening?
Yes, Mayor, I have a motion.
Councillor Stennett.
The motion is the Council apply for funding under the Federal Government's Safer Communities Grant for safety improvements at Rangeview Shopping Centre, Mitcham, including CCTV, improved lighting and other security measures.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Cutts. Councillor Stennett.
So thank you, Mayor. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. Some of the issues raised are similar to the issues raised in the previous motion to ensure a speedy end to this meeting. I'm not going to say anything further.
Councillor Cutts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, this comes out of a discussion I had with a real estate agent on the Rangeview shops who brought it to my attention a couple of weeks ago that another incident occurred at the Rangeview shops, and this is about the 5th or 6th over a number of years. One particular event occurred, which was an armed hold-up, where I was actually going to my post office box and I couldn't actually get in there because it had actually been cordoned off by police. So this is a hot spot. It is seen to be an area where I believe the IGA has got a CCTV, but a lot of the other shops there, many of them don't. In fact, I don't think any others do. That's the only one that has. And it is an area which people are starting to feel uncomfortable about this with their shops there, and I think that we need to look at this. There is the grant there. It's not coming out of our pocket. We're looking for money which is available and on the table, and we would appreciate the help of officers getting this up for us should the councillors today be willing to support this. But this is an area where there is increased criminal activity. So I hope councillors will support this. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Mayor, and I certainly thank the councillors for the support of the previous motion. And I'd refer to that motion, Mr Mayor, because it was very specific in that council will be applying for the Safer Communities Fund for mobile CCTV that could be deployed anywhere in our great city. And this is a really important point, councillors, because the officers have given us the advice that the hardwired lights and things like that are very engineering demand heavy on our officers. The last thing I want to do, and whilst I know they work hard and do work hard for us, the last thing we want to do is necessarily make more work for our officers when the time frames are compressed for the submission of the grant money. And look, I absolutely understand all the shopping centres in our great city have been subjected to this sort of crime. We've had, but the shopping centres, larger aspects of them are privately owned assets, and that's really important difference to make. You might have seen at Box Hill Central, a lot of that surveillance asset is actually the realm of vicinity, and our assets are in the public park. So I thank you for bringing it. I can't support it because the last thing we need to do is heap more work necessarily on the officers. That would involve necessarily dealing with the energy companies, and we know how difficult they are to deal with. And the engineering that would go into it, I understand the timeframes are really short. The previous motion covers the application for the grant. Let's leave it to the officers to figure out where those sorts of things would be needed. It may be Rangeview, it may be other places as well. So I can't support it, Mayor. Thank you.
Any speakers in favour of the motion? Any further speakers against the motion?
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Munro.
Councillors, I do wish to speak against this motion. Similarly to Councillor Barker, there are some places in the city that that are in shopping precincts that council has some jurisdiction, like Mitcham, for example. There is some public space. There's an intersection between public space and commercial space. But the Rangeview shops, I haven't been there for a little while, but there's not really any public space in that shopping centre. It's commercial space. And if there is an issue there around the commercial premises, and it's been said that the IGA has CCTV equipment installed, I think the onus is not necessarily on council. I actually think it's on the commercial businesses. And as Councillor Barker said before, we were talking about public assets, but where are we going to draw the line? And I think it's perhaps a bit disingenuous to say there's no cost to council. There is a cost, and often there's an ongoing cost. And while there might be grant money available for some of the capital cost up front, we have had experience before that we have had CCTV put in various locations, and we have had a shortfall of a substantial percentage of shortfall of the funding, and council then is expected to fund that. And in some of these systems there is an ongoing cost, and the ongoing cost is not likely to be covered by the grant money. So councillors, the question is, there's a lot of shopping centres, a lot of strip shopping centres in our municipality. Where do we draw the line? And to suggest that there is no cost to council, as I said, I think is disingenuous, and I'd urge you to reject the motion.
Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Mayor,
Councillor Luke?
could I suggest to the mover, Councillor Stennett, to potentially amend this motion to look at potentially exploring or assessing safety improvements at the Rangeview Shopping Centre?
Councillor Stennett?
This motion is not successful. That might be a subject to a different motion at some other point.
Okay. Do you wish to move an amendment, Councillor Liu, or leave it be?
I'll leave it be, thank you.
Okay. Any speakers in favour of the motion? Any speakers against the motion?
Mayor,
Councillor Masood?
thank you. I actually do support the opportunity for CCTV, but it does concern me that, and as Councillor Munro said, these are individual businesses. It's not even council property for us to fix cameras to, etc. And so it does concern me that we may well find that, you know, we haven't got the agreement to put it up, but it also raises the question that in recent discussions with the local police, that they said they always encourage if people have got CCTV, and I believe that we should, with our communities, be encouraging particularly businesses in strips, if they can afford that infrastructure, to look to do it, because we won't be able to pay for it all. And so I am a little concerned that we have a responsibility to put CCTV up in areas that we own and have to protect our community, but I'm not sure that we should be funding it on an area where it is private businesses who hopefully would take responsibility for their own security at their entrances and along their strip. As we know, the police very much appreciate that support from businesses, and they have been able to use CCTV to help in the resolution of a number of prominent criminal cases that we've seen in recent years. But yeah, I'm not sure that we should be funding this when it's private use, really, on a private business. Thank you.
Are there any speakers in favour of the motion? Any further speakers against the motion? Being no further speakers, I'll go to Councillor Stennett for the right of reply.
So, thank you, Mayor. Probably just make 2 points. Firstly, what we're not talking about is private space. We're talking about the public realm along Rangeview Shopping Centre that the public use, that's our land. And we're talking about a grant that closes in a couple of weeks that I understand that there needs to be a specific location mentioned in the grant application. In terms of, you know, council officers being burdened with work, well, you know, we can walk and chew gum. You can do more than one thing at the same time, and quite frankly, if we've got money being offered to us, we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in these improvements. We've applied for different grants before for the same purpose in different public spaces, including at Nuttawading and at Mitcham. Why not at least write a grant application and see if we can get some funding for this important work to take place? The police have actually said that while it is important for businesses to have their own CCTV cameras, it's also important for there to be cameras in the public realm, and these operate together to reduce crime and act as a deterrent and catch criminals when they've conducted whatever they've done. And So I see it as a bit of a no-brainer, but it doesn't really matter because obviously councillors have fixed views and they won't listen to anything I say anyway.
I will now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Motion is lost.
Division.
Division has been called. Those in favour? Councillor Cutts, Councillor Stennett, Councillor Davenport. Against? Councillor Masood, Councillor Munro, Councillor Liu, Councillor Barker, Councillor Bennett. Declare the motion lost. Councillors, are there any further proposed written motions for consideration this evening?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Munro. I'm not going to ask you to read the entire motion. Can you please give a summary of the motion for listeners listening to the audio recording?
Thank you, Mayor. The motion is to submit the following to the 19 October 2018 MAV State Council. It is calling on the board of the MAV to, in conjunction with its members, to look at the processes and structure for the election of the MAV board and president. It highlights A to H issues to look at. It's not prescriptive in what should happen in relation to those issues. They're spelled out, and point 3 is following the outcomes of such a review that any recommendations for change are taken back to the council members of the MAV for a vote.
Seek a seconder for the motion.
Happy to second, Mayor.
Councillor Masood seconded. Councillor Munro, opening speech.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, it's been quite some time, and certainly in my memory and engagement in the MAV, the structure of the election of the board, the areas that the board members represent, the election of the president of the MAV has not changed in my experience. I'm not sure when the last time that they changed the rules in that regard. Having been the MAV delegate and having actually run for office a number of times, and having familiarity with other organisations that have reformed their processes in terms of electing their members and their presidents, I think it's certainly appropriate that the MAV have a look at some of its structures. Councillors, in fact, it's quite timely because the MAV was in the Supreme Court of Victoria today. One of the board members is taking the MAV to court in terms of the eligibility of the state president, given the state the council that the state president belongs to has not paid their MAV fees, and so that's led to a question of law at the moment, and the court has put a stay on the eligibility or otherwise of the state president of the MAV. The broad thrust of this is to look at ways of ensuring that the best and brightest that the local government sector has in its councillors have an opportunity to represent at board level and the presidency the MAV, which is a substantial organisation in the context of supporting local government. It is not compulsory for a council to join, and we have the situation that Whittlesea has not paid its membership, so therefore it's not a member. It was in the press recently that Geelong was considering its position in the MAV. Councillors may know that Frankston was out recently. The Melbourne City Council was off, not engaged with the MAV for some period of time. My view is the MAV is at its strongest when it represents all 79 councils. And even when a council's in administration, the administrators are part of the MAV during that process. So I've highlighted some areas which actually covers most of the areas that relate to the structure of the board and the presidency. I've also proposed term limits for the presidency. I think in a political organisation, or that the issue should be looked at, but I think in a dynamic political organisation that is something that should be looked at. I think it was Stonington Council a few years ago brought to the table about the Melbourne City Council having a designated board position, so they didn't need to stand for an election, given it is the premier council. They actually never took that through, but I think it is worth part of an overall review in terms of the best structure moving forward. So, as I said, it's not prescriptive in what to do in the main, but it does, except for the fact that I do highlight that it may be worth rolling all the metropolitan interface councils into one single electorate instead of having the 6 that currently exist. And just I'll close by highlighting a point we had, not the last election, the one before. There are 6 councils in the interface, and the elections before last for the board position, only 3 of the 6 delegates voted. 2 of those delegates were candidates, so basically the member of one council decided which was going to be the board member for the interface councils. I'm not sure the appropriateness of the interface councils, because it's basically the outer ring of Melbourne, so Mornington is grouped together with councils right up to the north on the fringe of Melbourne, and I'm not sure whether they have commonality of interest, so it is something to be looked at, and I'd ask council to support the motion to take forward to the MAV.
Councillor Masood.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I do think there are times when reviews need to happen. I think I was a little disappointed, it's about not quite 2 years ago, seeing a council where they chose not to fulfil their membership, and it seemed to be directed towards one of their councillors who was actually quite a good performer, or seen to be a good performer in the sector. And I think the current rules do sometimes cause, as Councillor Munro said, the best and the brightest talent to sometimes not be eligible to put their hand up. And it's possible that a particular council might have 2 incredibly bright and talented people. And if that's the case, and one of them is not the MAV rep but wants to stand for presidency in their own right, then maybe that is possible. But we do need to review rules. I don't think anything should ever remain stagnant. They have a new CEO now at the MAV. It's probably a good time to be starting to have a look at some of this, and I think for all councils we should be going to State Council, and that's where we have our vote for this motion, and I commend Councillor Munro for putting it up. We don't know the outcome, but I think it's important to sometimes say it's time to have a conversation and look at whether or not the rules are the best that they can be, or whether they need some modification. So I support this.
I seek a speaker against the motion. Seek a speaker in favour of the motion. There being no further speakers or any speakers, there is no right of reply. Propose to put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Councillors, are there any further proposed written motions for consideration this evening? There being none, I'll move on to item number 8, public comment. A special committee allows for the opportunity for members of the gallery to make comment only in regards to officer report items number 6 and or matters raised by councillors under item number 7, other business. There were no items raised under item number 6, but three matters raised under item number 7. So if there is any one that would like to come forward, please do so to the front. State your name. You have a maximum time of 3 minutes to make your comment. Thank you. Yes, Gary, you can't make a comment on the Nunawading Community Centre because that was discussed in the special council meeting. You
Try not to breathe all over it.
Yep. So the comments only can relate to the MAV motion or the CCTV motions.
Well, I totally agree with Councillor Andrews in regard to the MAV, because going back a few years it was nothing more than a job for the boys as the state government funded it. But with the Nunawading Community Centre, I didn't see in the plan...
the Nunawading Community Centre was talked about in the special council meeting, not the special committee. So you can't make comment on that particular item this evening.
Okay. That's not a negative comment.
Well, I'll grant you some indulgence, Gary.
I didn't see in any of the specs that the contractor would have to supply a document of evidence to the origin of the building materials, especially steel, and it's being subject to what forms of electrolysis over the years. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that wish to make a statement? There being none, I'll move on to item number 9, confidential reports. There are none. So I'll go to item 10, close of meeting. Closing the meeting, I thank you all for your attendance.